Hey guys, it's Kevin in my review for Watchmen Season 1, Episode 4. If you don't like my story, write your own. And once again, guys, similar to Mr. Robot, I do apologize for getting this review out so late. I just did not have the time to review Watchmen last week. Anytime that I could have, something else got in the way, and I just didn't really have the time to do so. But finally, I have seen this episode, and obviously I was very excited for it, especially coming off the heels of that Lori-centric episode that really just took things in a whole different direction entirely, and I was very excited to see how things were going to go, especially since, like I said, that whole episode was focused on Lori, and up to this point, the show has been focused on Angela, so I was interested in seeing what they were going to do here, and for a while, it seemed like this episode was going to be focused on, and this was yet another really great episode. I will say this was probably the weakest of the four, but that's not saying much because Watchmen has been so consistently great week after week, and they've just been getting better and better. And this is the first episode that wasn't perfect. There were definitely, I mean, the other episodes weren't perfect either, but this is the first episode that did have one flaw that I think they could have improved upon. But overall, I still think this was a very well done episode. We got a lot of more breadcrumbs as to where things are going. We have a clear path of where the season is headed now, and there's a lot of things that very much intrigue me for sure, but we're just going to get into it. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is Lady Trieu, because this is the one thing that I think that the show kind of missed an opportunity on, is that Lady Trieu is a character that I think was presented well enough in this episode. We saw that she's this trillionaire. She's very easy to manipulate people into performing these tasks for her. We see in the first scene alone how she's able to just instantly manipulate that couple into going along with this plan where, like, they need this baby, sends them off to God knows where, and it doesn't seem like anyone is telling her no. It doesn't seem like anyone is stopping her. She doesn't seem to know the power of that word. Anything that she wants, she seems to get. And I think that was a rock-solid introduction, but based on that introduction, I assume that this entire episode was going to be focused on her. It very much seemed like that's where they were going, but that was not the case. We definitely see some of Lady Trieu. Again, we see kind of what's going on with her, that she has this obsession with Ozymandias and things like that, and that she kind of, maybe she possibly is behind the 7th Cavalry. It's very possible that she could be. It's very possible she could be behind a lot of things, and especially the end reveal that she actually is working with Will, and these two have this grander plan that's going to happen in 3 days in context of the show, and we don't really know what that's all about. But we also know that her daughter's having, like, these really weird nightmares about people, like, destroying her village or something like that, and I do think that's connected to what Lady Trieu is doing, but I just wish we had an episode to get more inside her head. And I'm not saying that they can't do that moving forward, because, I mean, we have 5 episodes left. There's definitely time for them to be able to do that. But I just wish we had a little bit more time to expand on her character, because I really loved what we saw of her. Chau is so great in the entire in her scenes in this episode. You see how presentable she is, but also how manipulative and almost evil that she really is. And Watchmen doesn't have, like, a good or evil type of character. That's not the kind of show we're dealing with here. There is no such thing as that. It's kind of like what Angela said to Topher, where, like, there's no such thing as lollipops and rainbows. It's very morally gray in that way. But because of that, I was hoping that we just could get a little bit more into who Lady Trieu is, and I think we definitely will before this show ends, for sure. I don't think this is, I don't think it's just she's obsessed with, Adrian Veidt and things like that. But I just wish there was a little bit more going on there. But that being said, I was very intrigued by what we got with her. I think that she is someone that could potentially be a really great villain for the show. I'm very excited to see where she does end up going in the coming weeks. And once again, just another really rock-solid introduction for a character. The show just continues to have some really interesting and different characters that are just getting more, that are just really just deepening the layers of this show. And Lady Trieu is a character that we've heard, rumblings about, but this was the first time we actually got to see her physically, and I really did love getting to see that here, and I'm very excited to see where she does go in the coming weeks for sure. But obviously, the majority of this episode, once again, the focus was back on Angela. And I mean, I have no problem with that. I think Angela is a fantastic character. I love what Regina King is doing with her. It's just, for me, I wish we got a little bit more with Lady True. But what we got with Angela was still fantastic. Her whole thing this episode is that she is trying to get more into what's going on with Will. She knows that Will obviously, went off on this planet. She pretty much is under the assumption that he disappeared, that he's not coming back. We know obviously that's not true. We also know that he's straight up lying to her at this point, but we get a little bit more into her and what she's able to do. There apparently is this tree that she unlocks that basically uncovers her entire family history. We get full confirmation that he was in fact the boy in the 1920s Tulsa riots and things like that, and that he survived, and that he is her great-grandfather, and that the parents that we saw in the first episode are her distant, are her ancestors and things like that. So it's a very effective moment for sure, but I also really like how Lori fits into this story, because the way that Angela's going about it, you can see that she knows that Lori is onto her, but she also doesn't want Lori to get too caught up with all of this. And, the fact that she doesn't let Lori in on the fact that her and Will are connected, I do think is a pretty significant thing. And that's something, and it's not just Angela. We find out that Cal is also doing this. Cal is straight up lying to Lori. He is undermining some of what Angela has done. He doesn't want to admit some of what Angela has been involved with, and for now, it's working for them. For now, they're able to keep up appearances, and Lori doesn't seem to have any suspicion, but I do think this is not going to last. I think eventually, some kind of information is going to come out. Something's going to go down where Angela is going to have to reveal more about what she's been doing, more about her connection to Will, all this kind of stuff, because we know how smart Lori really is. They've already established that Lori is pretty much the smartest character in the room at all times, and so because of that, this is someone that is very dangerous for someone like Angela, and I'm interested in seeing really where that does go. But like I said, I also really liked what we got to see with her and Cal. We get a little bit more into their relationship here, but also who Cal is, and we see that he's someone who he is very much a man of his, by his moral code. He doesn't like to lie. He likes to be very honest, and when Topher is, when for example, when his daughters are talking about, what could have happened to Will, what happened to, the chief, he straight up. But we also do find out a little bit more information about Will, which I really like seeing, and the big one is that he was, in fact, a police officer in the 1940s and 50s, so this very well could mean that he's had encounters with some of the other Watchmen before. We know that the first, wave of Watchmen were very prominent in that time period. This is when Silk Spectre was around. This is when the Comedian was around. This is when, a lot of these Watchmen were around, and because of that, it's very easy to believe that, he could have had more interaction on with them. Maybe he got to know Ozymandias a little more. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities for what that really could entail. But again, this is why having Lori is so important with this show, because she has so much valuable information in that way. And she's someone that can really get us more to understand more of what's going on, where their heads are at, where these characters have been, all that kind of stuff. And I really did like seeing that for sure. But again, that's why she also is very much a threat to Angela, because she does know so much. And though Angela and Cal at this point are trying to keep up these appearances and are trying to downplay some of what they've been involved in, which we find out in this episode that Cal had some kind of injury when they met in Vietnam, which we didn't really know all that much about, but I think that's something that, again, is being kept very secretive for a reason. I'm not entirely sure why at this point, but I do think it is a very interesting idea, and I'm excited to see where that does end up going for sure. But I think there's also a very good chance here that a lot of what Angela is fearful about with Crawford might not actually be something to be worried about. I do think that, yes, he definitely was hiding some things for her, but knowing that Will is now working with Lady True, I don't believe everything he's telling her is the truth. He even says that he is going to destroy her, and that it's going to emotionally wreck her with whatever he's about to do. So I don't really know if we can 100% trust Will at this point. We know we can trust Angela, definitely, but I don't know if we can really trust Will. I also don't know if we can trust Looking Glass here, because a lot of what he says very much points to the fact that maybe there's something weird going on with him. He has this crippling obsession with that squid that fell on that car, and he's been studying it very carefully, but he also now has taken hold of Crawford's KKK robe, or his, seemingly his KKK robe. And again, I've heard a lot of people say they think that Wade is going to go in a villainous direction. I don't really know if that's where they're headed. I do think there's a possibility that he goes rogue. I mean, we've already seen that he's someone that is very menacing, that he really does, when he wants to really go hard on someone and really just, really press hard, be hard pressed with questions, and really just interrogate them in that way, he doesn't hold back. And I do think that is eventually going to hurt him. But this episode definitely showed that there's more going on there than we think, and I'm excited to see really where that all does end up going for sure. But like I said, where things are going with Angela is definitely very interesting. Again, how she gets entangled with Lady True, we'll really just have to see. We don't really know what a lot of that plan is about, but it was definitely interesting to see. I like where that's headed, and I think they're going in a very interesting direction with that for sure. But we also get confirmation here that Angela's someone that doesn't really want help here, and this is not really news to us. We've seen Angela as someone that's very independent. She wants to approach things on her own accord, and she doesn't really want anyone to have to work with her in that way. And Laurie's someone who I think does want to help Angela, even though, yes, she's very much a threat to Angela, and I do very much see these two going in a place where they're both their own, sort of adversaries. I can also see Laurie going in a direction where she really does want to help Angela, and she wants to help her uncover, Judd's death and figure out what could have caused it and figure out if Will was actually the person that killed him. But clearly, she does not want to disclose this information to her. She wants to keep this between her and Cal. She doesn't really want anyone else to know at this point. And like I said, while I do think Cal and Angela are doing a good job at that right now, I don't think that's going to last. I think Laurie is going to be very impatient. I think Laurie is going to start, I think Laurie is going to start being a little bit more adamant on getting some answers. And there's going to be some things that just don't really connect. And even throughout this episode, we're seeing some things that they are already clashing on. Laurie feels that, the mask, for example, Laurie feels that in her perspective, people just wear masks because they don't want to be seen, because they have this insecurity within themselves, and this is their way of sort of magnifying that, of sort of masking that in that way. Like, it's not just a mask that they wear, it's a mask because they don't like who they are, and it gets them to be someone else, to like that they just want to seclude themselves in that way. But Angela, on the other hand, thinks it's very by the book. She thinks that she just wears a mask to protect herself, and that's really it. That's the only reason she does. And look, for Angela, we already know what that means. We know that White Night happened. We know that there was a time when cops were, completely okay, that they were able to go about things and nothing bad would happen. But then after White Night, that is when they had to start wearing masks, because cops are very much, a target of the 7th Cavalry at the moment. And so you can see why Angela feels that way, but you also can see why Laurie does feel that way, how she feels that these masks are just concealing their identities. And we saw that for someone like Rorschach. Rorschach was someone who was very radical in that way, but he also had very deep insecurities about himself. And I think that, again, just really shows that, yes, this might be a small thing, but the tension is already brewing between these two, and I really love the way they're setting that up. And again, we have a lot more information as to what's going on here. The whole thing about Cal's accident, I think, is definitely something that they are purposefully withholding from us, and I'm excited to see really where that all does go. But like I said, Angela's story was still really great. I still really love where this character's headed, and definitely continues to get more and more interesting as the season goes on. But now, finally, of course, we're going to talk about everything going on with Adrian this week, which was a little repetitive, except we now know more of how he's able to consistently make all these new Mr. Phillips and Mrs. Crookshanks. Apparently, they come from these crab traps, and he has to place them in, like, this infant chamber and basically they then emerge as themselves, but they're similar to babies where, like, they can't talk. They have to basically learn to do that as they go on, which is really interesting to see, and it definitely is some very crucial information because we see how Adrian's had to do this a bunch of times, and this also shows why he's able to constantly have all of these clones of Mr. Phillips and Miss Crookshanks. It's not that he can't kill them, it's that they just keep appearing in that way, and you can see how he very much feels that he is in a prison, and I think this very much confirms what's going on. Adrian's in a prison, he's trapped, and he is doing what he can to try to get out. He is constantly failing. You know, every single thing that he's trying to do, it's just not working out, but he is doing all he can to try to get out of this prison. And I very much do think that maybe what Lady True and Will are doing maybe is connected to getting Adrian out. Though Lady True might have also been the one to imprison Adrian. Again, it's very unclear at this point as to what's going on here. And that's the thing I think they're doing really well with Adrian, is that this is something that could get very boring. This is something that, because it is very repetitive in that way, because it's basically the same thing every single week, but they're doing a good job of throwing in just an extra little nugget every single time. Yes, we're still seeing him interacting with Mrs. Crookshanks and Mr. Phillips and getting increasingly annoyed by them. We're still seeing him become very erratic. We're seeing what this is doing to him. We're seeing how he wants to get out of here. But now we know a little bit more of their origins. Now we know more of how he's able to continue to consistently make them and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's a very interesting detail for sure. Jeremy Irons just continues to kill it in this role, and I'm just consistently fascinated by what's going on here. Again, I think there's definitely still a lot more going on that we don't know about. Why he's in prison, what's caused all this, that's still very unknown to us, but we'll just have to see where that does end up going. So yeah, moving forward, like I said, there's still a lot we don't know, but I think that this episode did a good job of getting us more into the mystery, getting us more into the idea of what's happening here. We now know that, you know, Lady True and Wade have this thing planned that's going down 3 days from now. We know whatever it is, it's going to destroy Angela. We know there's a lot of information that Angela and Cal do not want Lori to be in the know about, even though Lori is clearly trying to help them. I also do very much think she's onto them as well, but they don't want her to be in the know of what's really going on. But we also know a little bit more about Adrian. So I think this episode did enough to get us more into what was going on, get us more into the general story. And like I said, the only thing that does bring it down for me is Lady True. As much as I enjoyed her inclusion in this episode, I really love what Han Chau was doing. I like the ending reveal and things like that. I just wish this episode focused a little bit more on her, because we don't know a lot about her character. She's someone that is very mysterious. We know that she has this admiration for Adrian, going as far as to literally have a statue of him, and in many ways is trying to emulate him in that way. But then if that's the case, why would she be the one to imprison him? Which is what a lot of people are suspecting is going on, that she's thrown him into this prison. What's really going on there, we don't really know. We'll really just have to see where that does end up going. But I mean, aside from that, this episode delivered in basically every way that it needed to. In terms of technical stuff, I mean, again, that's always a standout when it comes to Watchmen. Directing here was still so great, and the writing, I mean, is just so excellent with this show. And like I said, they're doing such a great job with keeping you riveted, even though there's so little we know of what's going on. And that's very hard to do, but the show is really keeping us on our toes in a really great way, and that really is due to the excellent writing here. I mean, Lindelof is just really going all out with that kind of stuff, and the humor as well. I mean, there was definitely no shortage of it. The funniest line for me, though, is when they walked into Lady True's, little mansion and things like that, and we see the statue of Adrian, and Lori just straight up says that it looks disgusting. Again, stuff like that just works so well with the show. Lori's just so blunt in that way, and I really love what they are doing with her. Some really great humor within this episode for sure, and I definitely really did appreciate that. But again, just overall, I just really love the writing here. Cinematography-wise, I mean, it's always beautiful to look at, and definitely some really great shots here for sure. I mean, the score and things like that, just everything really was fantastic about this episode. Like I said, it really is just that I wanted a little bit more from Lady Trieu in this episode. I think they should have focused a little bit more on her. I would have liked if we got more into what's going on with her and her daughter, because I think that it is very much more than just she's obsessed with Adrian, and she has this plan to basically take over everything, because we already know that she took this couple's house. She did the same thing with, she's done the same thing with other people. She's very easily negotiable in that way, and she's able to manipulate people into thinking what she's doing is in their best interest. But I think that it goes far beyond that. I think there's something more going on with Trieu that we're just not seeing at this point, and I'm excited to see really where that does end up going. But overall, this was another really great episode for sure, and I'm definitely going to give this episode of Watchmen, Season 1, Episode 4, if you don't like my story, then write your own, an A-. But that's my review of this episode of Watchmen. Let me know what you guys saw this episode overall, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and we'll see you guys for that. Okay, bye.